Hello, my name is Benjamin Williams,
And my name is Skylar Johnston.
and we will be talking today about the Dakota Access Pipeline. That is a 1,172 mile long stretch of underground oil pipeline between North Dakota and Illinois. The reason that this pipeline has been in controversy is due to it crossing underneath Native American territory, most notably the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the sacred burial grounds it goes underneath. People also worry about the possible contamination in nearby water sources.
The reason we chose this topic is because it is a great example of risk versus reward, as there is a large risk of pollution to vital sources for the nearby cities and towns, but there is also the reward of cheaper gas pumped through the pipeline. Together, we have chosen several articles to discuss on this topic.
The first article we have chosen to discuss is by the New York Times. It is an article that projects more of a liberal standpoint, describing how we need to move the pipeline from the Standing Rock community and any water sources that surround that community. One of the more focused points on it is describing how they shouldn't be able to place the pipeline anywhere near that anyway, as it's supposedly illegal permits in violation of the Clean Water Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, and other federal laws like that. Their focus is that they have a treaty with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe with how they should that is their land and they shouldn't have to fight for it when they had to fight for it so long ago. It also talks about how the law enforcement has been extremely hostile towards the peaceful Standing Rock protesters, and how they've had to use large amounts of militarized force against people who pose no threat.
I chose to do a more conservative article, which was the Forbes article, and it discusses points of like where money can be made, where money might be lost, and how the pipeline helps the area around it and the economy around it. And it points out that even though that some of the points the Native Americans are making may not be true or may not be valid, does not mean that we shouldn't start looking more into the economic factor of it. And I feel that the author of the article really pinpoints his view on the money-making aspect and how it'll lower gas prices and how it'll be huge for like income for companies and for the government and the local community, and that maybe the risk is more so not as it's like more important to do, like to jump towards, and just seeing how the results could be in the end might be a little more rewarding than what the Sioux are thinking.
This third article we'd like to talk about is an article that takes a more conservative standpoint from the Orlando Sentinel news topic. It describes the process that we've actually taken to be able to build the pipeline between North Dakota and Illinois. It describes that its first notable sentence is but the real story of the Dakota Access Pipeline was revealed in court documents in September, and it is nothing like the activists' tale. In fact, it is the complete opposite. How the activists and the protesters who tried to shut down the pipeline's construction, they tell stories that have nothing to do with what actually happened. And so it goes on to describe how the company who's building the pipeline, Energy Transfer Partners, spent years working with federal, state, and local officers to be able to route the pipeline and with the fewest possible disruptions, and how they worked so much longer than what people actually say. Protesters actually claimed that the pipeline was fast-tracked, and that they didn't let the tribal leaders any opportunity to be able to have a word in the process, which actually the project leaders participated in hundreds of different meetings with the community leaders, with the Sioux tribe, and how the Sioux tribe, even when met with officials, would either reject the option for a meeting or have the meetings earlier than what they told the people, what they told the officials, and those officials would show up, and the Sioux tribe would be done with their meetings, and they wouldn't even bother worrying about seeing them. It really focuses on a sort of deal of there's misinformation between the protesters and what actually happened, and how there's nothing on the fault of the company who's doing the pipeline.
In the next article I chose, it was a liberal viewpoint from the LA Times, and what it did is it compared the Standing Rock protest to the Oregon protest. That was about a group of individuals that went and occupied a piece of land in Oregon, but it was more like violent because there was weapons involved and they were like a small militia. And they take that idea that people have been comparing both groups, and that actually the people in Oregon are doing it in a more white supremacist, racist way, whereas the Standing Rock Sioux are actually standing up for something that they believe in, and it's something that they deserve because we've been gradually taking things away from them over time, and treaty after treaty, we've been taking away more of their land and more of their rights, and it kind of pinpoints really that this isn't just a battle of land, it's a battle against racism and letting indigenous people share like the same rights that we do and not depriving them of the same rights that maybe white people have. And so that's like one of the values that I really got out of that article. And it also kind of discussed how maybe our nation hasn't fixed itself from the way we used to be, and that as a group that we should probably move towards that, and that really the whole comparison between the Oregon militia and the Standing Rock tribe is like a joke almost, and that we shouldn't even be arguing over this since we're taking away stuff, and that we are putting people's lives at risk. And just the whole idea that the risk isn't worth taking in this point, that we should be respecting other people's rights, that it's in the Constitution, and that they are living in America, and that they have those rights still apply to them. So the author is really pinpointing the value of just freedom for everybody, and that there is a specific value on equality, and how we shouldn't be treating the scenarios the same because they aren't standing up for the same thing, and that kind of thing.
So the final article that we chose to discuss is an article by the Guardian. Is titled "Standing Rock is Burning, but Our Resistance Isn't Over." And so it starts off talking about how it gives just a background of this water protectors, who is what they call themselves, supposedly more focused on the fact that we could pollute the water but they seem to also be more focused on the Standing Rock Sioux tribe rather than the water itself. But it starts off talking about how they are burning makeshift and traditional structures in a final act of prayer of the Dakota Access Pipeline. But this mostly, it then starts to talk about how this seems to be history repeating itself. How in 1890 police murdered a man named Sitting Bull on the Standing Rock Reservation, thinking he might start a uprising, and then 2 weeks later they massacred more than 300 Lakota at the Camp Wounded Knee, and then it starts talking about how we're just doing the same thing. But then it more focuses on the fact that on the monetary value of it. It's in Standing Rock, it says that 41% of citizens live in poverty, which is almost 3 times the natural average. It starts talking about how schools are failing, jobs are very lacking in what they actually need, and 24% of them are underemployed. They don't have health care. They depend on the wells for water, which the wells themselves are unsafe, and so this pipeline could make them worse. And then it talks about how the Dakota Access Pipeline would cost $3.8 billion, which is more than the entire budget of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But even when that gets finished, then Standing Rock will still be in poverty, and the most expensive part of their lands will not be the schools, homes, or hospitals. It'll be the pipeline that they don't want there. And so it's more focusing on the fact that they don't have the ability to almost pay for the citizens that live there now, and you're threatening their ability to pay it later. But now we're going to focus on our own opinions and thoughts on this section, and I'm going to let Skylar start this off with talking about what she thinks about it.
Personally, I feel like I stand more with the liberal viewpoint that this is about people's rights, because if you look back over history, you see that we slowly really are taking away more from these individuals. The reservation used to be really large, and in one of the articles it talks about how over time it's progressively gotten smaller and smaller, and now we're just taking more and we're putting their lives at danger even more than what they were before. So, to me, I really value the fact of equality among people, in that there shouldn't be disadvantages because of what you look like or what your background is. And also, to me, the real point of also this could contaminate water, and the whole fact that contamination can lead to really large scale problems that'll cost more in the long run than it does take to build this pipeline. And one of the things that could happen is that people brought up was the idea of just moving the pipeline, and I just don't understand why we just don't move it lower to where it doesn't affect the people and that kind of thing. So.
Well, when it comes to my values, that I'm more standing on also a more liberal view. I consider myself more conservative, but when it comes to this, then I take more of that leftist point of view. I really don't approve of this. I get that one of the major viewpoints is the pollution that it could cause. It could damage the land. It could damage the water. It could damage the air. And a lot of people will focus on climate change, and they'll talk about how this could damage the fact that we already have bad chance for extreme climate change with how we live, and this would only make it worse. But I do see other viewpoints, such as in the climate change, the best way to transport this oil, because this crude oil is going to make it here somehow.
Yeah.
It's not just going to sit up there and we're just going to leave it there. It's going to make it here, and environmentally, the safest way to do this is the pipeline that they're constructing. Or, but also when it comes to moving it, you see that they did take years to focus more on where they're going to put it, what constricts it, and there's several different places. What it comes down to is they are putting certain people above other people, which I don't understand how you're doing that. Because if they move it down, they get closer to major cities. If they move it up, they get closer to other cities. And really, they're putting the Native American Standing Rock Sioux tribe underneath these different citizens instead of trying to find just a way. It really just comes down to the fact that it could be more expensive. It could be more dangerous to put these different cities at risk. But as for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, I do believe that, I mean, there's no really, as much as I hate to say it, there's really nothing they can do.
Yeah.
As there are officials coming down, they're starting to move, evacuate people from different tribes, whether they want to or not. They will do it by force. They used to have the presidency on their side. Barack Obama told these people who are making the pipeline, told the officials between North Dakota and Illinois, he told them to find and consider every possible way to get this pipeline where it needs to go. And once Donald Trump was in presidency, that completely changed. He signed the bill that said basically this pipeline is being built whether people want it or not. It didn't specify that it has to be built in that line, but it will be built. And so if the people don't want to find a way to do it by line, or if they think that the money's not worth these people's lives or the risk of the water, then that pipeline's going to be built through the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, whether they want it or not. And our military force, whether it has to be national, state, or local, they will take out that Sioux tribe, because Sioux tribe will have no chance against them. And so I want to say that we can actually do something about it, but it will take hundreds of thousands, possibly at least 1 million people to gather at that place, because as it was okay when Obama was on presidency, I feel like Donald Trump is less likely to conserve his resources to getting it where it needs to go. And so I'm just but what do you think about that?
I think going back on the idea of the fact that they're choosing a group of people over another, I really like that point, because they're either, like you said, they had thought about moving it down, but apparently it would have, like, pollution could potentially affect a larger city other than like the small village that is like directly reliant on the river that it's going under. And so I'm with you on, like, I don't know how you can pick one group over another, because I mean, we're all people, and then like you can't really do that. I think that, once again, playing on the value of like equality, like that's just not how I don't know how you can pick. Like, it just feels like something that's just like really old world, like, kind of stuff. And so I also like, with the change of presidencies, they talk about how Obama had like stopped it, and then not even like a couple weeks later, when Trump was in office, he had changed it back over. And I feel that something like that should, like, once it's said no the first time, I just feel that people shouldn't have to, like, people shouldn't be able to change it, because I mean, it was said no before. You're giving these people false hope. Like, they were worried and they were freaking out there for like the longest time. Like, this is only going to last for 2 weeks, and then we have to be back out here in the cold again. And it just kind of sucks for them, because they didn't have, like, they just still have to go through it. And it's still even a debate almost up until today over, like, these people are still arguing this. And I don't know how you can go this long, like, arguing something like that. Like, that went on for months, and, like, even in one of the articles it said people hadn't covered this for, like, 5 months. So, obviously, it wasn't that big of a deal up until, like, it became more of, like, the presidential candidate's standpoint, because they knew that they could work with a vulnerable group of people, and instead of just, like, encompassing everybody as a whole. So, I mean, that's just what I take out of the whole thing, is like just the idea of, like, I guess, equality, because it's just kind of what keeps the world stable, almost.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this issue. It's definitely an issue that needs to be talked about, and I feel like sometimes people will brush it aside because it's a I don't want to say forgotten, but it's a overlooked,
like, small scale
problem that has to deal with a people that we really brush to the side like they're non-existent. So I appreciate you listening to this podcast as we talked about it.